You want to talk a little bit about this question of whether the past and the future are real? Because as I said at the outset, there is this view in physics that the past and the future exist, but as I understand it, that is a deterministic view. In other words, the idea is, look, the past has happened, so it's set in concrete. The future is inevitable, and
Right.
it's we are moving through time in much the way that you might just move through space. It's out there already. You think it's undetermined, but that's just because you haven't seen it. Now, it's not clear to me that that's exactly what the issue was within Buddhism. I mean, in any event, Vasubandhu
Right.
winds up rejecting the idea that the past and future exist.
Well, he does sort of make an argument that seems like an argument against determinism. There's one argument where he critiques the view that past actions could be real, which is actually, well, he argues against the Vaibhashika who's defending that view by saying, well, how could you have karmic results of an action now if the past action didn't stay there until the next result came? So they're saying, you kill somebody now, what happens to that killing act? What happens is it causes some future rebirth in hell. And so how does that happen if this disappears? And Vasubandhu says, well, actually, if that's the case, then you could never lessen the severity of the result by engaging in good actions. Whereas the Buddha did teach that you could, if you did something negative, you could cultivate positive activity and transform yourself in such a way so that there wasn't an inevitable result in going. You wouldn't be born in hell necessarily. And that would be impossible if this was just like every single action had a direct result in the future. It doesn't quite fit exactly with a full deterministic argument, but he's saying that can't be. There has to be another option. And what he says actually is that all that really is real is the present, but every action affects your present mind. So in the next moment, so if you engage in killing, that's going to predominate your consciousness for a long time, and maybe if you die right then, you would go immediately to hell. But if your mind is affected by many other actions before you die, that will change the character of your rebirth. Still, so he's appealing. That's not a full answer to what you said. He's appealing to the possibility of change based on the past being something that doesn't really exist, and so doesn't really have full control over the future. But he's not entirely answering this deterministic question. I think it would make him very uncomfortable, the idea of a total deterministic universe.
And when he says only the present is real, which I think is his ultimate kind of conclusion, right? I think a modern listener would think, oh yeah, I knew that was part of Buddhism because I went to a mindfulness retreat and they said live in the moment.
Right.
Don't worry, the past is gone and the future you don't know, so just live in the moment. But that's kind of a coincidence, right? I mean, there's not an obvious actual intellectual connection between the sense in which Vasubandhu was grappling with that question and the sense in which a modern meditation teacher in America would say that, right?
Right. I mean, he doesn't even really say that the present is real. Okay. He thinks that the present is also relative to the past and the future, and that we only think of it as real in relation to those other two. And so what's really real is the ongoing causal flux of change, and then, things only exist to the degree that they're related to other things. Mm-hmm. So there isn't really a single moment that you can say, well, now is the real moment, and then now is the real moment for him. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are meditative practices that tell you to focus on what's immediately in front of you. That's not exactly the same.
So we've seen a lot of things that are less stereotypically Eastern than one might have imagined, I think. But I think if you look at his view of causality at a fine-grained level, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe this is a little more Eastern, because I gather he's kind of saying, I mean, it's common to talk about, even when you think of yourself as being in a causal framework, to think of there being causal agents. Things do things to other things. and not just in the organic world. I mean, people do things to other people, but we have kind of carried that metaphor into our view of the inanimate world, like a particle goes and bangs against another particle. But he actually cast doubt.
But we also have, mathematical equations that describe exchanges of energy in ways that undermine our intuitions as to what particles are.
Okay, so he's, in that sense, you would say, well, first of all, let's say he is kind of saying, no, you should. There are no agents, right? I mean, there's just kind of flow. That's the Eastern part, is the word flow, right? I think of it as being flow, but what you're saying is, even here, maybe he's been vindicated by science.
Well, I think that maybe I don't want to, place him on that, reliant on that, in a sense. Because science is always going to change. Yeah. But I think that he's vindicated by science undermining our intuitions in the same way that his view undermines our intuitions. He does say, so his view is that things are real to the degree they're substantial, to the degree that we can talk about them in causal relations. Mm-hmm. So he does want to say that things do have substantial reality within certain frames of reference. And that is, I think, similar to the scientific division that we have between different modes of analysis and levels of analysis. So we look at chemistry, and we look at, the operation of society, or the operation of a body, or biological level. So all the different levels of analysis that we see in our causal stories, but mm-hmm. the realities that he's describing are realities at a level that we have chosen to find where our significant causes and results reside. Mm-hmm. But what that means is that subjective frame that we place on reality, even though it allows for an objective input through that window, means that whatever we're getting isn't really ultimately real mm-hmm. from its own side. Again, we're looking at the world through our own perspectives, right. through our own concepts. And so that's true even at the lowest level, even at the level of these sort of momentary constant flux dharmas that are coming into existence and out of existence every moment and causing one another in this causal chain and causing our experience. That causal story is also something that we have to throw into doubt at a certain level, because we know that ultimately we only see it because we're capable of thinking in this way.